You know, it's with heavy hearts that we've been watching what's transpired over in the United States this past week. You know, it's frustrating that here in 2020 that we're still having to clearly and articulately affirm that there is no place for racism. Not in society and not in God's church. You know, my heart aches for people of color who daily bear a burden that I've never felt. And even if you're convinced that there's not a drop of racism in your heart, this is still a moment to empathize with those who live with the pain of feeling other. You know, when we talk about eradicating racism, the first place that we need to look is our own hearts. The sinful human heart is a repository of fear, mistrust, discrimination. And unfortunately, Christians are not immune to those kinds of attitudes. And so we must absolutely and resolutely affirm there is no place for racism in the church. There is no place for racism amongst God's people. Now, this is not just a contemporary thing. In the early church, some Jewish Christians wanted separate but equal churches. They wanted Jewish churches and Gentile churches. And the Apostle Paul says, absolutely not. And so he wrote to Christians like the Ephesians and called them to embrace a no racism policy. This is what he wrote to the Ephesians in chapter 2 of that letter. For he himself is our peace, who has made us both one and has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility, that he might create in himself one new man in place of the two, so that making peace, he might reconcile us both to God in one body through the cross, thereby killing the hostility. Thereby killing the hostility. This is what Jesus has done. Jesus is the one who brings healing where there's been division, who brings reconciliation where there's been alienation. Through his work on the cross, Jew and Gentile, Nigerian and Scot, Pakistani and American, through his blood, we are one in Christ. You know, this is what I love about Centerpoint Church. I mean, here we are in Scotland, a nation that's 96% white, and yet we're a multi-ethnic, multinational church, multicultural, where people from every nation, every tribe, every language are welcome. Now, we're still growing to fully realize this. We're not there yet, but our vision is inspired by what heaven is like. Now, this is what we read in the book of Revelation. This is the scene that we see of what heaven is like. In Revelation 7, after this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. In Christ, we are one. In him, we share one Lord, one faith, one Spirit, one baptism. God has called us to be a picture, a model, a testimony of what it looks like when people from different ethnicities, different races, different national origins come together under the banner of Christ's name and set aside those differences to love God, to love each other, and to share that love with the world that's hurt and lost and dying. So my strong encouragement to us is, let's set our hearts, let's join our minds and our actions to affirm that there is no place for racism in the church. There is no place for racism amongst God's people.